The Pætheon presents What Came Out, The Origins of the Fastbrækers, written and read by the author, Andrew Stewart Bergerson, based on real events. Bastian and the Crack of Death. The first time Bastian told me a tale, he lied. It was a bad habit, and he was good at it. He never struck me as a malicious liar, just a compulsive one. Like many people caught in the act, he forgot to mention any events that cast him in a bad light. Sure, my heart went out to the Fastbrækers. That was our nickname for the suspects who spent the night in the detention center at Schermer Jail. They were in the system now, and I had other suspects to interrogate. I'm talking here about Hugo Rank, that sad, lonely adult who condemned bold adolescents for doing what he dared not do himself. I was impressed by the consummate skill with which Bastian told a tale, for I often caught him leaving things out. I asked him directly one night, as we sat together in the library, for an unabridged version of this one. "Why now, all of a sudden?" he asked. "I want to be an author," I admitted, shame on my face. "I want to write the tales of the Fastbrækers." Like a parent, Bastian rewarded my confession with a tale. "Then you'll need to begin them properly." In this telling, the story seemed so truthful, so Bastian. Had I heard him wrong the first time, or had I not really been listening? You can judge for yourself. I will try to retell it from his perspective. I'm not referring to the Bastian he later became, the self-appointed jester of the Fastbrækers. I'm referring to the runaway Bastian, who had no idea where he was running to. Quill, ink, and parchment cannot do justice to the tale. Bastian and the Crack of Death really should be danced and juggled with flame and sword and song. At least that's how Bastian would have told it. And he was quite the storyteller. It was late in the season of flowers, on the second Wednesday in the month of the tree. Bastian was alone, lying in the tall grass in a meadow on a hill, flipping his knives casually in the air. It was early morning. In the more civilized parts of the Ring Empire, the young men of the common castes were rising from their poor pallets to begin a day of laboring in fields, workshops, and stores. The noble lads from their feather mattresses. Next week, with the start of the new semester, they would be compelled to listen, more or less attentively, to their tutors at the start of a new semester, like his former classmates at the Forsyth Preparatory School for Boys. Not Bastian. Here, in the almost north of the vast wood, he was surrounded by tall grasses and wildflowers, damp from the dew. He caught whiffs of pine and sod on the morning breeze. He watched as the flower heads ever so gradually turned their faces towards the sun, which had barely stuck its head out from behind the crags to the east. It took its time rising. Bastian had lots of it. Even if you had walked right by, he would have been invisible to your eyes, unless you knew just where to find him, or were flying above him like a bird, except for the knives flipping up and down. That's how you always knew it was Bastian. If you had caught a glimpse of him, you would have been struck by his pointed ears, golden yellow eyes, and green grass hair. Nothing too outrageous. Who hasn't seen a Grelf wandering these mortal fields at twilight, or in a market selling elderberry wine? Feyfolk were hardly welcome in the Eighth Age, but communities could be found in all 5 lands. Hardly remarkable. Now, you have probably heard tall tales from people who claim to have spotted a pixie or some other woodland sprite. They will tell you that they chanced to be in the right place at the right moment, when the morning sunlight caught the dew on the petal of a foxglove or a snapdragon. But more likely, it was 2 fireflies competing to attract a mate. Well, Eldari are an even rarer sight, at least in the Pætheon. They are princes of the Feyfolk and the best of their kind at hiding from ordinary people like you and me. This one even glowed faintly like a candle through a veil, especially when he was planning mischief. If Eldari ever do climb down from the boughs of the living tree, they hide in dark forests or deep caves, coming out only under the stars. It reminds them of the eternal twilight of the spirit world. Not Bastian. He joined the circus. He learned all 5 arts of the jongleur, including how to juggle mana, the supernatural kind of magic. He used his swords to create fantastic tricks with fire and light. The fire felt dangerous enough to feel real. His illusions were real enough to feel dangerous. Bastian liked to recall his most popular act. Just imagine, yours truly, a caricature of painted dogs, this spider monkey from Filk, and an elephant. I juggled swords standing on Makadu's enormous head, all fire and flame. The dogs jumped on and off her back and all in between her legs, while Tix the monkey jumped from dog to elephant. We pretended to fight, but made it look real. I always won. No one was listening, but Bastian kept talking. Here's the punchline. Tix is the word for elephant in Balamo, and Makadu means monkey in Marathi. So a monkey named Elephant was riding wild dogs around an elephant named Monkey. He laughed at the memory. Of course, she's kind of sensitive about her name. Bastian made his voice sound deeper, like a pachyderm. You're always disrespecting me, Bastian. You treat me like a stage. Yeah. You just want a bigger share of my ticket sales. Bastian was his own best audience, but he reserved all the starring roles for himself. The vast wood covered a large part of the near north of Central Ward, and it was 4 days before the Harvest Festival, so his audience of wildflowers was in full bloom. Their solid heads, full of colorful petals, rested precariously atop their thin stalks. Lying in the sun atop this hill, surrounded by wildflowers, made him feel like he was in the spotlight again. We want a show! We want the flame dancer! It was mostly Black-Eyed Susans, with a smattering of coneflowers. Bastian always knew how to read a crowd. The young elder stood up and took a bow. And who would like to assist me today? Pick me, Bastian, pick me! It was a particularly cute Black-Eyed Susan. Well, aren't you a pretty little thing? The flowers were not really talking. Why waste words when he never listened? And Bastian had never had the patience to learn the art of ventriloquism. It's like this, he explained to the Susan, who had already turned her head away. I never seemed to learn the right lessons. He recalled wistfully the 8 years he spent in the Foresight School. Like the sons of the Schlachtu families in the lands of Nod, he was expected to take over the manners of his Lord Father when he died. But my Lord Father's a Grelf. He'll live for centuries, bless his heart. So the subject did not seem quite so urgent to Bastian. I got an F in Foresight. That's how Bastian liked to tell the tale. The young progeny of the nobility worked diligently to acquire the conspicuous snobbery of their parents. Bastian noticed that they liked to insult the indentured servants who served the meals in the school refectory. Leading players should always be friendly to supporting actors. Bastian took pride in being the generous sort. And do you ever see any of those precious little lordlings plant a seed or sow grain? No, they leave all that to the freemen. He was still lecturing the Susans. Come to think of it, the freemen also prefer to keep their hands clean. Serfs shepherd the Lord's cattle. Slaves sow his crops. The Susan was hungry for sunshine, not a lesson in sociology. But Bastian kept talking. Bastian always kept talking. And as for them, even the Sidru and Rabu left the mucking out of barns and stables to the untouchables. Readers from the Ninth Age may be unfamiliar with these words. Bastian was using the Jot names for serfs and slaves. I've even seen coyotes try to hold on to their measly scrap of dignity. That's the Andros term for untouchables, but it was used all over the Ring Empire in the Eighth Age. Perhaps unfamiliar to readers in the Ninth, it was pronounced like the beast, coyote, but with a silent E, coyote. Technically, untouchables were not even a Jot. They were people who had no caste at all. We may be mucking manure, but we're better than those dumb beasts. Bastian repeated this phrase several times because it made him laugh. Mucking manure, mucking manure. Bastian added the next thought to cross his mind. That's what the coyotes tell themselves anyway. At least I'm not for dinner. And the beasts are too dumb to know the difference. During his many years of study at Foresight, Bastian often took long breaks from his schoolwork to contemplate the strange contradictions of the great ladder of being. You gotta hand it to the restoration of order. Everyone knows their place, but each one acts like they're better than the rest. Bastian offered the restoration a round of applause. A true work of art. In his quest for inspiration as an artiste, Bastian spent many happy hours diligently observing other people working. The large estates of his peers reminded him of a carefully orchestrated ballet, but without the orchestra. Each cast danced around the stage, fulfilling their preordained roles in society. Each body moved only in prescribed ways, feet and hands coming close but never quite touching, mouths speaking but not talking, as silent as the grave. Bastian concluded from all these observations that the nobility of the lands of Nod sent their children to the Foresight School to learn how not to work at all. Why should I, he reasoned, waste my youth listening and studying and examining only to learn how to do nothing? I'm already a natural at that. So he decided to begin doing nothing straight away and as often as possible. An artiste must practice their craft. Bastian decided to take his own advice that very Wednesday morning. He set his feet on either side of an unsuspecting blossom that had the audacity of growing taller than its peers. Golf was one of the many games he had learned to play at the Foresight School. Like polo and hunting, these sports required large amounts of land and even more patience to master. I can't fall behind in my studies. He flipped his knives, trying to decide which hand he wanted to use for his drive. He preferred the left. Then he repeated the ritual, once, twice, to remind himself of the knife's balance and weight. He adjusted his hips, preparing his stroke. Having selected his weapon and projectile, he now found his target. A formation of stones jutted up on the far side of the hill, 40 strides from his position. A dark crack crept up between the rock layers. "How about you take a crack at that crack?" Bastian suggested to himself. "Then you can make a crack about it." This particular hole was the nest of an ornery queen cobra with the ominous name of Shiwang. She was big enough to eat a small deer if she really opened her mouth wide. The crack, by contrast, was the perfect size for practicing his stroke from 40 lengths. "Flame Dancer is ready to tee off at the first hole," he announced, while lining up his shot. "The crowd is spellbound." In a single curved motion that circled back on itself, the jongleur decapitated a flower, flipped the dagger around, and, while the head was still in mid-air, struck the clump of flora solidly with the side of his blade. Whoosh! He sent the flower head flying towards the crack in the rock. "Score! The crowd roars! A birdie! Flame Dancer is 1 under par!" Bastian danced around, waving his arms in the air. "Hole 2, folks. Let's see if the Flame Dancer can make his magic again." He lined up his shot, then twisted his waist swiftly and smoothly. Whoosh! "Another for Bastian! Go, Bastian! That one's an eagle! Double birdie! What a day for the Flame Dancer!" And again. Whoosh! "An albatross! A rare and ominous bird! Flame Dancer has scored a hole-in-one every time, ladybuds and gentle cones." There were no real eagles or albatross nearby. Bastian was referring to golf strokes, though he barely understood the rules. "That's 3 under par for you newbies. If he keeps this up, he may break his own world record." Bastian was more interested in Shiwang, who had a taste for bird eggs. The giant cobra liked the way they popped in her mouth when she crunched them. She didn't mind eating fairy children either. Not a very fairy game, if I say so myself, and I do. Bastian tried to explain his logic to the very Susans he was so gleefully beheading. Fairy children cuddle with baby birds because their down's so fluffy. They think it helps them grow up to be better aviators. Of course, that's just make-believe. Everyone knows that fairy are the best flyers in the forest. This whole time, Bastian had been speaking a little too loudly. He was quite diverted by the prospect of waking Xiwang from her morning nap. A whole flock of birds flying across the hill today. But the question is, can the flame dancer sustain his tremendous lead? Whoosh! This time the flower head had a lovely arc but struck the side of the rock instead of slipping into the crack where the snake lay sleeping. Oh, that's a dub, folks. But at least our hero hit a house, so he only lost one shot. Whoosh! This time it bounced up over the rock after hitting the same spot on the side of the crack. And now a lost ball. What a disappointment, folks. That one had too much hook. Whoosh! A precise miss. Another duff. What a sad day for the great sportsman. Flame Dancer has lost his juju. The cobra finally took the bait. Who in the fields are you talking to? A dark voice hissed from the dark crack. 'Tis I, dread serpentine, Bastian Flame Dancer. The young jongleur stood, with knives raised in challenge. He assumed the boasting intonation of a knight at a joust. By this time, I hope you realize that Bastian was addicted to the thrill of his own performances. He was one of those annoying actors who never stopped doing bits on or off the stage. It struck me as ironic when I first heard him tell a tale. By then, Bastian was locked behind bars in Shermer jail. He faced felony convictions for assaulting officers and misdemeanors for illegal street performances. Even today, I would not want young readers to see this Bastian as some kind of role model. Xiwang took her time emerging from her nest. Her scaly skin was so black that it looked like the darkness of the crack grew a tentacle. It congealed in the sunlight into a thick naga. Bastian imagined quite a deep hole down under the hill to hold such a beast. She rose up out of the grass, her head swaying. Look at me, feeling, for I am death. Hungry for bird eggs? Sorry, he mocked, but the yoke's on you. Foolish child, the giant cobra hissed. I take my fastbræk where I will. Xiwang turned to go back to her nest. Her mark was unnerving, even from across the meadow. It looked like she had eyes on the back of her hood. Bastian had no desire to be the cobra's morning meal, but the elder knew that she had to warm up before she could strike at full speed, so there was time for games. Turn around, Xiwang! Turn and fight! When she ignored him, Bastian broke character. Don't take it personal like. It's all your parents' fault. Who gives their kid a name like Death? Then he flipped the script again. Did the other snake boys and girls tease you? Is that why you've got the sads today? The Eldari were there, at the beginning. Xiwang swirled her whole body around to face him. Her fangs were a full 40 lengths away, but her eyes locked on their target. Do they teach you nothing of your own history at the Foresight School? There was something inviting about her question, enticing. Yeah, Foresight and I never really got along. That's kind of the whole point of running away. Such a clever lad, the serpent said sarcastically. That's what Headmaster Gwynnig used to say. Such a clever lad. Bastian remembered how much fun it was to practice acrobatics in the graveyard. The best time was during evening mass. While he did flips from tombstone to tombstone, he liked to think of all the old teachers who lay buried underneath. That's when Headmaster Gwynnig would run out of the church in horror. You are Eldari. What would your Lord Father say? Gwynnig's impromptu sermons were part of the little game they liked to play. The headmaster rebuked Bastian every time he practiced his flips in the graveyard, and Bastian did flips in the graveyard, so the headmaster would get a chance to practice his public speaking. As I said before, Bastian was the generous sort. Gwynnig quivered with outrage. Do you know how many rules you've broken? But there are so many, Headmaster. How can anyone keep them all straight? Bastian's mouth was a wellspring of clever remarks. The more serious the occasion, the more unseemly his wisecracks. I'm leaving out the truly naughty ones for the sake of young readers. His acrobatics always attracted a crowd. The proud sons of the noble houses of Nod did not like to be reminded that Bastian was a tick more noble than they were, so they teased him about the jot mark branded on his arm, a bird's egg in an empty nest, a foundling, hardly the proud heraldry of his adopted father. Such concerns for status might seem rather trivial to readers today, sticks and stones, but there was nothing more important during the Restoration than one's place on the great ladder of being. The other boys relished the chance to repeat nasty rumors that Bastian had been adopted only after his father killed his birth parents, that they had committed crimes against the Restoration. The sad part was that Bastian knew these rumors to be true. A big thank you to all my fans for attending my show. Your love and admiration means so much to me. Bastian liked to address the mob while dodging rocks and branches. It really was good training for a career in the circus. The handful of Grelfie pupils at Forsyth threw their projectiles with extra enthusiasm. And a special shout out to my Fae fans for supporting me this evening. You guys are the best. Grelfie came from the spirit world ages before Bastian, but they were still viewed with suspicion. So Bastian let his Grelfie peers prove their loyalty to the Restoration. A proper mob chased him through and around the cemetery, like a monster hunt on the night of the restless dead. Bastian loved to trick or treat, especially the tricks. He leapt up onto the roof of the chapel in the nick of time. Almost got me there. Bastian knew that young boys needed to be praised for their effort. Don't worry, failure builds character. Until they tired of the game. Bastian waved at them as they retreated, defeated, from the field. Good night, my friends. Standing at the entrance gate, Headmaster Gwynnig shook his head. Someday your joking will get someone hurt. That's what my father says. Micus, your esteemed father, is Lord Marshal of the Empire. You should listen to him. He says that too. Did you two have a meeting without me? The headmaster stormed away, but Bastian stayed put. Perched on the ridge of the chapel roof, Bastian glowed faintly green under the cool night sky, flipping his knives. While Bastian was daydreaming, the giant cobra had moved silently forward. She easily halved the distance between them. Wait a minute, Shiwang. How'd you know I went to Forsyth? Orphan, misfit, truant. With each word she slipped a half-length forward, stretching and contracting her torso. Such a familiar story. The sad little elephant runs away because everyone teased her for her funny ears. So she joins a circus, becomes a clown, and gets paid to let other people laugh at her. That's not how I'd tell the tale. The circus elephant who works for peanuts. That's Bastian in a nutshell. The jester who is a mockery of himself. Or is it the puppet whose nose grows every time he lies? Who have you been talking to? Hawkrider? Bayberry? Bastian couldn't have been more proud that his reputation had preceded him. It must have been Damselwing. He's such a gossip. What would you like to know? Shiwang accommodated his curiosity by sliding a little closer. Our skins record the history of the Pætheon. Ouch! That much ink's gotta hurt. Idiot. This time she lurched forward angrily. History is read from our skins, not tattooed on them. It is our punishment. For what? Giving willies? Impersonating millipedes? Badly, I'd say. Shiwang snapped fiercely in Bastian's direction. It was only in the air, but the elder flinched for just a second, and she was another length closer. The first Naga committed hubris. We made the mistake of teaching the meaning of life and death to the Thinatoi. Oh, big words! Bastian shook his jazz hands at the deadly giant cobra, not 10 lengths from his head. He knew that Thinatoi meant mortals, in the sense of creatures that belonged to these mortal fields. The headmaster often seeded that word into his Sunday sermons, as if to remind Bastian a pneumatoi from the spirit realm, that he did not belong in the Pætheon. We showed you the truth of your miserable existence. If you say so. It was a cheap shot to mock a snake about its lisp. Foresight was annoying, but I liked the vast wood just fine. You can live in father's filk, she slid forward again. It matters not where in these mortal fields. You shall die, whether by the fang of the hunt or the slow constriction of time. The serpent savored these words. She stood now 9 lengths from Bastian. Yuck! He stuck out his tongue. Gross metaphors. You shall die, Bastian Flame Dancer. And I, she moved forward again, am death. 8 lengths, Bastian calculated. Not me. I'm an elder. I'm going to live super long, even here in the Pætheon, like for forever. No, not like for forever. Although Shiwang had a spirit of chaos, she had excellent grammar and liked to correct anyone who did not. 7. The snake herself was a good 4 lengths long, which now placed her upper body within striking range. Many ages hence, even you, elder, will waste away from age. 6. If you're not hunted down before your time. Bastian almost caught a smile crossing Shiwang's face, but then again, death always looked like she was smiling. Bastian never wasted much time thinking about living or dying, but he knew how to stretch out a performance. It's a blessing and a curse to live in the shadow of the living tree. That's what the headmaster always preached. Bastian nonchalantly put another length between him and the cobra, keeping his eye on her at all times. 7. Shiwang advanced. The gods didn't want mortals to grow jealous of their immortality. When mortals learned of their fates, they revolted. 6. Her tail and the sound of her voice had a hypnotic quality to it. It was part of her ji, that natural kind of magic unique to each kind of creature in these mortal fields. Bastian could not help but be impressed by the performance, even if Eldari were immune to such enchantments. That was part of their ji. The War of Callous Gods? You're talking about way back in the First Age. That was like... Bastian stopped to count ages. It was the year 9376 by imperial reckoning, the official calendar of the empire that began sometime in the Third Age. That fact was enough to confuse his calculations, since Bastian had never paid much attention in history class. Well, it was a really long time ago. Bastian retreated again casually, as if he didn't realize what she was doing. 7. And for all the eons since, we serpents have had to record every episode of your miserable history. We know more about you than you know about yourselves. Ugh, what a snoozer. Bastian really did hate history. 6, 7, 6, 7. Bastian kept his distance as he danced with Shiwang across the meadow. Behind him, the hill descended sharply down to a creek. It was a steep incline. Bastian could even look down on a maidenhair tree from above. Sometimes the boys at the Foresight School cornered Bastian, as Shiwang was trying to do. In a closet or behind the barn, they beat their humiliation into his body. The first time, Bastian reported the incident to Gwynnig, but it involved some of his best pupils, so the headmaster refused to believe Bastian's lies. You're an insolent good-for-nothing. You think I hit myself just to frame my classmates? Gwynnig wagged his finger. I think you're a clown who's always up to mischief. Bastian decided to rise to the headmaster's expectations. Every time they beat him, he paraded his wounds for all to see and acted as if he had done it to himself. You illegals should all be evicted, like the freeloaders you are. Gwynnig always summed up his sermons with such clarity. He really was an excellent public speaker. But it did strike Bastian as curious that a Grelf, of all people, would say such things. Bastian quoted from Sunday Mass, "We're all just sojourners here in the mortal fields." Not for much longer, Xi-Wang replied, as if Bastian had been speaking to her. The gods tasked my kind with instilling fear in the hearts of yours. You like your job way too much, Snake. We are memento mori. Whatever that means. Death reminds you to cherish what life you have left. Still don't care. Is this how you irritated your teachers with your senseless chatter? That's why I left Foresight. Bastian retreated to the razor's edge. They never appreciated my artistry. Fool, you should have stayed in your nest where you were safe. 5. Xi-Wang liked it best when her prey had no chance of escape. It looked like she was tickling victory with her tongue. Her head slipped backwards slightly in anticipation. That was her tell. Bastian leapt suddenly backwards to a stone hanging over the edge of the meadow, and his entire posture changed. He replaced his throwing knives at his sides and drew the crossed scimitars mounted on his back. St! Bastian loved the sound of tempered steel as his nimchas slid out of their metal clips. These were the tools of a flame dancer's trade. You should try more card games, Xi-Wang. Then you wouldn't get played so easily. You're an insolent boy. I will teach you to regret your antics. Xi-Wang opened her mouth widely and displayed her full fangs dripping with venom, another one of her G weapons. But instead of shrinking in fear, the elder only stood up taller, his own fangs in his hands, ready for battle. It may be, but you are nothing other than a cruel and vicious monster. You kill for fun and justify your actions with a fairy tale. They were both a little surprised. Xi-Wang's prey had never spoken to her like that before, and Bastian had never before posed such a challenge, at least not outside the big tent. Her head tracked his every move. Bastian taunted her with his blades. Xi-Wang reacted with small strikes. Neither dared launch their full body at the other. Both wanted to avoid falling down the side of the hill. Fighting was not wholly new to Bastian. Foresight had taught him to defend himself. Stage combat had filled in the rest. But circus performers worked together to make it look real. This serpent's playing for keeps. So Bastian stalled. He shifted his weight from side to side, mimicking the swaying of the cobra, his swords like her fangs, his eyes matching hers. No fast break meal for you this morning, Xi-Wang. You'll pay for your crimes. The giant cobra made a cackling kind of laugh, like she was coughing up a stone that she had swallowed by mistake. And who shall impose punishment? The foolish jester, the lying puppet, or maybe Bastian, the petulant child? Bastian, the slayer of rat snakes. But he was uncertain. Bastian knew he could juggle anything, and flame dancing was really quite dangerous. He began to imagine new ways that he might use his circus skills. You're not even Bastian. You shed your name like your skin. Xi-Wang was right. Bastian Flame Dancer was the role he had adopted when he joined the circus. He thought it made him sound exciting and dangerous. She's trying to distract me, he realized. Gotta make her make a mistake, lose her juju. The situation reminded Bastian of a verse from a Marathi tale. For snakes, it was a horror story. The evil mongoose, Tricky Ricky, kills the mother snake and murders all of her children. Bastian decided to play both roles, the snake and the mongoose, while jumping back and forth like the latter. Eye to eye and head to head. Keep the measure, nag. This shall end when one is dead. At thy pleasure, nag. 2 lines of epic poetry were enough to incite the snake. Hissing with rage, Xi-Wang lunged at him, fangs extended like a forked bolt of lightning. Bastian didn't expect so much G after being out of her nest for such a short time, but he had no time to debate anatomy with her. A split second before her massive jaws snapped shut, Bastian rolled his body alongside her triangular head and slid down her thick trunk. Recovering on a patch of hill a few steps away, he reassured himself. See, that wasn't hard at all. Shiwang turned around to face him, her body recoiling beneath her. He cut off the heads of a score of wildflowers with his left sword like an executioner, and with his right blade he knocked them up into the air. This time, though, he began to juggle them. He used swords to get them afloat and mana to keep them there. He learned this gag from a magician. Standing on the elephant's head, Bastian would turn around and wave at the audience while the balls juggled themselves. Now it was flower heads that bobbed and danced gently in the air like soap bubbles. "What? No more threats?" Bastian challenged. "You'll talk less with veins full of venom." She struck again, right for his head. Bastian ducked out of the way. Bound by magic, the flower heads moved as he moved and hovered in front of him when he stopped. They began to glow from the slow friction of mana. Shiwang recoiled. She struck again, and again he dodged. Again she recovered. "I will enjoy watching your eyes grow dim." "It's not polite to play with your food." This time the snake struck low, and Bastian flipped over her head with the agility of an acrobat. He landed on her far side. The flower heads followed him like the tail of a comet, leaving a trail of sparkling mana. Bastian stopped and struck them solidly back at the cobra, one after the other. They exploded like firecrackers around her dark, scaly head. Shiwang hissed and snapped. Snakes do not like flashes and bangs. Bastian was as surprised as the cobra that the trick was working. He continued the barrage until he had exhausted all his ammunition. Then he guillotined another 10 flowers in rapid succession and raised them up for another volley. "You ready for more?" Shiwang reevaluated. The explosions effectively blinded both her eyes and her tongue. The snake could not make sense of her surroundings. She hissed her resignation and ducked her head out of the smoke, slithering through the high grass with a burst of speed. "Yeah, there you go, Death. Crawl back into your crack." Her tail sank into the darkness of her nest. Their little sparring match was over. I'm sure you realize that Bastian could easily have hit the snake directly. He only wanted to humiliate her, and he was having too much fun to end the game. "Next time," he yelled at her, "I shall land my sword on the old dragon's head." "I pray you face one of my noble cousins someday." The voice of death echoed from deep within the crack. "The great worms, serpents with legs and wings, snakes of unusual size, terror to sheep and cows, all gaze upon us and despair." "You mock death," she replied. "You think yourself immune to its terrors, so you misconstrue it." "What's to construe?" "The true horror of death affects those who are left behind." "Like torture?" Bastian didn't like the sound of that. "The longer you live, the more you suffer, and Eldari live a very long time." Bastian didn't think anyone cared much if he lived or died. He could think of no one that he would miss if they were gone, so he didn't take her warning seriously. At least, that's how Bastian told the story. They fought. Every time the Lord Marshal actually allowed his son to come home from school for a holiday, but with venomous words rather than fangs. "You don't know death," Micah said without looking up from his desk. "You weren't there." Their arguments always ended the same way. The restless dead walking these mortal fields, the fabric of the cosmos being torn asunder. Bastian had heard the tales of the seven many times before. Blah, blah. "The place for spirits is the spirit world. If you value any small part of my life's work these past centuries," Lord Micah demanded, "it should be that simple truth." Micah was right. Bastian did not value the restoration of order. He couldn't understand how a Grelf, like his father, could devote his entire life to ridding the Pætheon of his own fey kind. How could anyone hate themselves that much? "Then why bring me here in the first place? Why didn't you leave me there, where I belonged?" "Your parents forced my hand." "Like you gave them a choice? It was war." It was murder. You were an infant. You made me into an orphan. Micus looked up at last from his work. And now you're an adult. It's high time you start behaving like one. It was precisely when he thought about his Lord Father that Bastian felt most like standing in a meadow on a hill, late in the season of flowers, playing with his knives. Look for the next episode in this podcast, Sanchx and the Perfect Hideout, and the novel Detention, Volume 1 of the Tales of the Fastbrækers. You can visit the Pætheon for free maps, glossaries, and more, or support this project at Ko-fi/the Pætheon for access to Discord, hard copies of zines, role-playing adventures, and more. This audio recording has been a production of the Pætheon LLC. Music created by Gerbob for the Pætheon LLC. The Pætheon and the Tales of the Fastbrækers are registered trademarks of the Pætheon LLC. No parts of this story or audio recording may be reproduced or transmitted on any medium for any reason without permission of the Pætheon LLC. Bastian and the Crack of Death. What Came Out? February 2025. Copyright 2025. The Pætheon LLC. All rights reserved.